Someone in your tribe just stopped breathing. No hospital, no funeral home, no plan. Just you, the body, and a question every human group has faced since the beginning. What do we do now? The oldest deliberate human burial ever found is 100,000 years old. That means for over 90% of human history, before writing, before agriculture, before cities, humans were already answering that question. And the answer wasn't simple. It wasn't leave the body and move on. Here's where it gets strange. In 1932, archaeologists excavating Qafzeh Cave in what's now Israel found something that shouldn't have existed according to what scientists assumed at the time. A human skeleton, deliberately positioned, arms folded with deer antlers placed directly on the chest. Deer antlers don't end up on a chest by accident. Someone placed them there, on purpose, roughly 100,000 years ago. This wasn't an isolated case. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, researchers found Neanderthal remains surrounded by pollen from multiple flower species, including some that weren't native to the immediate area. For decades, this was cited as evidence that Neanderthals held funerals with flowers. That specific interpretation has since been debated. Some researchers argue burrowing animals may have brought the pollen in. But the burial itself, the deliberate positioning of the body, wasn't in question. Someone put real thought into what happened to this person after they died. So why does this matter so much? Because burial isn't practical. If you're a small group of hunter-gatherers, digging a grave costs you time, energy, and tools you need to survive. Evolutionarily, that's expensive. There's no obvious survival advantage to burying a body instead of just walking away. And yet, across completely different regions, completely different time periods, completely different species of humans, the behavior shows up again and again. Here's where it gets even more specific. At a site called Sungir in Russia, dated to roughly 34,000 years ago, archaeologists found two children buried head-to-head, covered in thousands of ivory beads. Each bead would have taken roughly an hour to carve by hand. Estimates suggest the beads alone represented thousands of hours of labor. For two children, that's not a burial, that's a statement. Around the same era, at a site in Sungir and comparable locations across Europe, researchers began finding something even stranger. Burials where bodies weren't just placed in the ground, but arranged in specific, deliberate poses. Some held objects in their hands. Some were painted with red ochre, a pigment that shows up at burial sites across multiple continents, spanning tens of thousands of years, with no direct communication between these groups. Red ochre keeps appearing. That's the mini mystery inside the bigger mystery. Nobody knows exactly why ochre became so universally connected to death. One leading theory: the color resembles blood, and blood was deeply tied to concepts of life force across countless early human belief systems. Painting a body with something that visually represents blood may have symbolically represented an attempt to return life, or mark the body as significant, sacred, different from an ordinary corpse. We can't interview a 34,000-year-old person to confirm this, but the pattern itself, appearing independently across unconnected groups, tells us something. Whatever death meant to these people, it meant something big enough to justify enormous effort. Now here's the part that changes the whole picture. Burial wasn't universal. Some ancient human groups did something completely different. At Herto in Ethiopia, researchers found 160,000-year-old human skulls that had been deliberately removed from bodies, cleaned, and in some cases polished smooth through repeated handling. This wasn't burial. This was something closer to keeping a physical connection to the dead, carrying a skull, touching it, incorporating it into ongoing life rather than putting it away. Different groups, different eras, wildly different approaches. And that's actually the real discovery here. There wasn't one universal ancient death ritual. There were dozens, maybe hundreds, independently invented across isolated populations who had no way of comparing notes. Which raises the real question underneath all of this. Why did nearly every group of humans, regardless of location or era, develop some kind of ritual around death at all? Anthropologists point to a specific psychological mechanism. Once humans developed the cognitive capacity to imagine a future, to plan, to remember specific individuals as unique and irreplaceable, death stopped being simply an event and became a problem the mind had to process. A body that used to talk, laugh, hunt alongside you, suddenly stops. Something in the human brain, it seems, refused to treat that transition as nothing. Some researchers argue this same cognitive leap might be uniquely human, or close to it. Elephants have been observed lingering near the remains of dead herd members, sometimes for days. Chimpanzees have displayed behaviors resembling grief. But the deliberate, symbolic, effort-intensive ritual, the ochre, the ivory beads, the carefully folded arms, that level of investment appears to be something our species specifically developed and then kept reinventing over and over in complete isolation from each other. By the time you get to more recent history, agricultural societies, early cities, organized religion, death rituals had already existed for tens of thousands of years. Religion didn't invent the funeral. If anything, it's closer to the reverse. The instinct to mark death as significant may have existed long before anyone had the concept of a god to attach it to. So think about this the next time you attend a funeral, or lay flowers somewhere, or simply pause for a moment when someone you knew has died. You're not performing some modern social custom invented for convenience. You're continuing something your species has been doing for at least 100,000 years, something so deeply embedded that it kept independently reappearing across every isolated group of humans who ever existed, none of whom could ask each other for advice. They didn't have hospitals. They didn't have funeral homes. They didn't even have language as developed as yours. But somehow, again and again, across every continent, in caves and open plains thousands of miles apart, humans arrived at the same unspoken conclusion. This person mattered, and their absence deserves to mean something.